Welcome to Convo Fango. Today we are joined by visual FX supervisor at Industrial Light and Magic, Julian Foddy, and today we're talking about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Yeah.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
It's great to be here.
Jules, I call you Jules because we go way back, but Jules, thank
Yeah.
you for coming to hang out and chat with us today.
It's my pleasure. Really keen to sort of sharing a few insights into the work that we did on the movie.
Please. Okay, so this is definitely like not to wax too euphemistic here, but this is definitely the epitome of a visual feast is what we have in this movie. And this was like a massive team effort. So can you tell us about particularly what parts you guys worked on and what you brought to life for this?
Yeah, so I was the ILM supervisor for all the work we carried out in London on the project, and that was sort of primarily the whole of the Illuminati sequence of the movie. Pretty much everything from when we first arrive at the Illuminati headquarters and Strange and America wake up in the biomonitoring room. And then the subaltern sentries marching Strange to the tribunal. And then the tail end of the tribunal sequence and the sort of hollow monitoring screen where we watch Wanda taking out all the sentry robots, which was a huge shot, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. And then, of course, I guess the sequence that everybody remembers and the thing that we knew was going to be huge while we're doing it, which is Wanda taking down the Illuminati one by one in all the sort of various gruesome deaths that they meet. Each of those presented its own individual challenge. So that was all our work all the way through, and then the subsequent chase through the tunnels afterwards, where Strange brings the roof of the tunnel down and floods the tunnel, and we think that Wanda's drowned, but obviously she lives to fight on. So that was the initial kind of award of the work, which we started quite early on in the project. But then later on, also we picked up some additional work as well, which was also in the I think it's 838 universe, which is when Strange and America have first sort of portaled into that universe. They arrive on the rooftop. Strange pukes, but then when they make their way down to they make their way to street level, and we're sort of treated to these views of Greenwich Village like we've never seen it before, that all the buildings are covered in all these weird and wonderful kind of foliages, and all the signage is different. There's loads of other little touches which people may have not picked up on, but every visual cue we could throw into the mix to kind of make it look like we were in a different universe. Even down to the pizza that America eats is actually CG, because the prop on the day kind of didn't look quite appetizing enough. The cheese hadn't really melted properly, so we had to recreate those in CG.
It's even CG pizza. Are you serious? That's wild.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a nice evening with my son one night where we ordered like 3 takeout pizzas, and I shot them all for photogrammetry and reference textures. Which we had to eat them all, of course.
Shucks, that's rough work. That's the rough
Yeah.
part of your job, right?
And then I guess the sort of the final sequences I should mention that we worked on, Zombie Strange coming back to life, which is all very cool, kind of leading into the final climax of the movie. And then I actually contributed some of the Wanda and America magic to the sort of Mount Wundagore battle, where Wanda is trying to drain America's powers away. So that sort of rounds up, and then the ILM team in San Francisco also jumped on board, and the key item of their work was the third eye that Strange develops at the very end of the film. Yeah.
Very cool. So you guys did a lot on this. Like there's like a huge chunk that you guys worked on for this.
Yeah, I mean, I was sort of involved in the project right from its early inception, back in sort of October 2019. So quite a long time ago now.
Like a bit.
That was sort of the original draft of the movie, and we got involved for concept art and tests. And then obviously COVID happened and things went into sort of hiatus. But yeah, we were always going to be heavily involved. And the original plan, the original movie was quite different that we were planning, but we always thought we were looking at around 400 shots or thereabouts, which is sort of roughly what we ended up with. But I don't know what the other vendors had, but I think we're probably high up there in terms of who did the most work on the movie.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
Yeah. But you know, I think we were quite lucky as well in that our sequence seemed to really just progress from start to finish in terms of how it was shot, and then into post production. That there was relatively few changes, or or cuts, which sometimes it happens on these kind of films, that the script and the story evolves as we go along in post production. But I think the Illuminati sequence kind of stayed pretty much in the format we shot it in, and that was really advantageous in sort of delivering that amount of shots in the amount of time that we had to do it.
Let's talk a bit about those Illuminati kills, because those were way more brutal than I was expecting for them
Yeah.
to be. And I mean that, and like obviously this is Fangoria, so I was like cheering for these, and I was just like, it caught me by such like sweet surprise, and I was like, this is disgusting and amazing, and I love
Mm.
it.
Yeah, it was sort of a real treat to get to work on this stuff, and we knew as soon as we started it, really, we knew it was kind of going to be the material, the bit of the film that everyone was going to be talking about, these memorable deaths, and and the brief really was from Kevin and all of the Marvel team was to go as gruesome as possible. That it's a Sam Raimi movie, it's a horror, we're touching on horror, and we can be a little bit more gory and kind of brutal with some of the deaths than perhaps people are used to in the MCU. So yeah, we went to town really, and starting out, I guess, with Black Bolt, who's the first to hit the floor. That was a real interesting challenge, and obviously the actor has a mouth, so our first challenge was to sort of seal his mouth up digitally. So we used kind of texture material from his real skin and the stubble on his face as reference, and gave him a CG mouth, a lack of a CG mouth. But perhaps what's worth mentioning is that the simulation that we had to do to kind of blow the back of his skull off and liquidize his brain, as it were. The only way we could get that to kind of work and look realistic was to do it in super slow motion. So we actually looked at reference of people in wind tunnels and how their face wobbles around, and then replicated that motion. And the way we did that was, effectively slow down the shot to 120 frames, give us a lot more time. So the simulation is really accurate. And there are actually like we modeled lumps of skull that's all inside the helmet. So that's actually what's rattling around when the sort of head explodes. And I think the real final touch to that, which none of us actually heard until we saw it in the cinema, is that squelching noise that Skywalker sound added as well, which sort of just adds it ups the ooh factor to it all.
It definitely, it's like a nice little, yes, like.
Yeah. And then moving on to Reed Richards, and I guess it's also worth mentioning here that perhaps what people won't realize is that both Black Bolt and Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards, their costumes are entirely digital throughout. Even in the ultra close-ups, that's all CG that they're wearing. They were wearing kind of grey motion capture suits on the day.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, but so moving on to Reed, and this was kind of visualized as how Wanda could use her magic to sort of squeeze him or put him under so much pressure that he just would explode. But rather than perhaps going with kind of just an explosion of matter, which has kind of been done before, we were given reference of there used to be a toy called the Play-Doh barber shop, and it was like a guy's head with holes in it. You put modeling clay inside a Turner handler, and this stuff would come out in sausages. We were kind of given that as references to what they wanted this to look like. So I guess there's almost a slight comedy element to it, and he just gets squished into all these sausages. So that was our kind of technical challenge. But I guess what we found when we started doing is it looked a little bit just like the body was just emitting a liquid or something. So we had to put quite a lot of research and development into how, in the sort of the computer generated stuff we were doing, that actually bits of the clothing would tear away, and you could see that get transferred into the sort of pile of spaghetti of Reed that was being accumulated on the floor. Whilst I said we were given free rein to sort of go completely gruesome, if we'd done that for real, of course, there would have been a lot of kind of, bone and gristle and flesh and blood. But, we sort of kept things a little more sensible. So the majority of it is blue and black, like the costume, rather than flesh color.
And it adds to that Play-Doh element of it, which makes it more fun kind of gruesome than the kind where you're like, I can't look at this, or I need to look away. It's it's like, it's over the top to where it makes it very fun, and you're just like screaming at the screen and like disbelief and awe, and you're just like, this, it's just so fun. You're just like, I was losing my mind the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, there was some interesting sort of continuity challenges with that as well, in that the John Krasinski footage came as part of the reshoots, which happened to the additional photography, which happened later in the process. But his remains then lie on the floor for the whole of the sequence, and a lot of that sequence was sort of already well underway when we got the John Krasinski footage. So we kind of had to estimate in advance how much spaghetti he would turn into and where it would spread to, so that we created this pile of sausages of him on the floor way before we'd even started the shot of him actually getting killed. Just because there's no way that you could deliver that amount of shots and wait to see the sort of final results of the
Right.
we had to estimate what it would look like in advance.
How the Krasinski sausage is made.
Yeah. And then I guess moving on into the other deaths. I guess perhaps the biggest shocker, of course, is Captain Carter kind of getting taken out so easily by her own shield.
I had to keep in a scream for that one because I was like, no fucking way.
Yeah. So I mean that was great fun. The whole Captain Carter beat is great fun. Sort of when she kind of leaps off the statue, hurls the shield at Wanda. Wanda catches it and throws it back. There were some interesting challenges for us there in that a certain portion of that sequence was shot in London with a stunt double, and then there was other shots were done in LA as part of the additional photography with Hayley Atwell. So this was an instance where we had to do some face replacements onto stunts. And that allowed us to leverage a little bit of artificial intelligence or deep fake technology, as people might know it. Using that too. So we sort of developed a technique there where we approached the shot originally as if it was going to be a CG face replacement using a digital double, but then we would then take Hayley Atwell's face using the AI, train that back onto the digital version of herself, and it just gave us a much more kind of physically plausible and the performance almost felt realistic. It felt like you were getting little nuances like eye darts and lip curls as she sort of grimaced as she throws his shield. And it's the sort of thing that if you were to try and work that in with a CG performance, it would be a lot more work. So it's a technique that we're going to use again.
That's awesome.
So that was, obviously she gets sliced in half by the shield. So we had once again a few sort of gruesome effects to dial in there, like this little droplets of blood on the shield and things like that. And then, of course, the final death is Captain Britain. So not Captain Britain, Captain Marvel, rather, who puts up a valiant fight, shall we say. She's the one that sort of gives it her all. And, there are moments, of course, where it looks like she's actually going to win and her photon powers look like they're about to take Wanda out, but ultimately kind of we had to, and this was a real storytelling challenge for us actually, this beat, in that with all these very fast moving shots and very, very quick cuts, we needed to kind of really get the message home visually of how Marvel's winning and then Wanda kind of steals herself and Wanda's red magic wraps around and encapsulates everything and then sucks it all down into this sort of hyper intense ball of energy, and boom, the whole thing explodes. And sort of what we found was it almost came down to a battle of colors, that with everything moving so fast, the only way to get that sort of story across was to really make sure that we started out predominantly yellow and orange, and then we swing into a predominant red over the whole color of the shot. And that's what really helps tell the audience that Wanda's won. Of course, Marvel's death, the way it kind of works is that Wanda has completely drained all of Marvel's powers away. The batteries are empty, so she's effectively just a normal human being as she's launched into the statue. Then that statue basically falls down and just crushes her. And goodbye, Maria Rambo.
Yeah. Does it ever just blow your mind? Do you ever stop to think about the technology that's available now and all the techniques that you guys have developed compared to even just 10 years ago, and what you can do now that maybe you could have done 10 years ago, but it would not look like this?
And I think there's several examples of that, to be honest, in this sequence, in that perhaps 10 years ago, attempting to do something like the Illuminati fight, which was all entirely in a CG environment, that whole atrium where they fight it out, which is referenced against the British Museum in London, to sort of tackle a 400 shot sequence and assume that it's just going to be okay to do the entire environment digitally throughout. That would have been a very big deal 10 years ago, but now we can kind of, with sort of the render engines and even though we haven't used real time, but everything is faster and everything is more accurate and more realistic. So you can rely on rendering an environment for that amount of shots. It's going to look realistic throughout. And similarly, the sort of the AI-based face replacements, like I just talked about, I think that's something that really has only come to fruition in perhaps the last 2 years, but it's a game changer, and perhaps even the work I'm talking about isn't. It's a good example, but if you look at some of the amazing work that's been done recently on Book of Boba Fett with Luke Skywalker's face, and and also in various other projects that ILM have got coming up as well as have had coming out. This use of kind of AI face swap technology, it as a visual effects supervisor, when you kind of look at a prospective project and what the shots coming up might be, it used to be that if you saw like a hero face replacement that was half screen, it would terrify you, and you think you were looking at sort of 6 months worth of work to make 6 months worth of work to make a shot work. Whereas I think now with this sort of face swapping AI based technology, we can be a lot more confident. I'm not going to say it's necessarily cheaper or easier. It still requires a lot of skill and a lot of talented artists, but I think it gives us a level of confidence about how the results are going to come out that perhaps we didn't have before. So yeah, that's a big change for us.
So overall, not as big of a gamble going into
absolutely.
it. Yeah. Amazing. Let's talk about Zombie Strange, because obviously we're excited for that. That was a lot of fun as well.
So I guess Ireland were kind of responsible for both burying him and then digging him up as well. In that the San Francisco team, led by Florian, they were responsible for the shots where Strange and Wong, isn't it? They drape him in a tarpaulin, lay him in the ground, and then all the bricks magically assemble themselves to cover him over. And I thought that was really kind of some nice work there with the cloth simulations of the simulation of the bricks moving into place. But then I guess he's just dead Strange at that point. When he re-emerges from the ground, at some unspecified point later in the movie, he's Zombie Strange, and he looks a little bit like the rats have got to him while he's under the ground, in all honesty, because there's been quite a lot of sort of flesh has rotted away. So that was the challenge.
Chunk right here. This was amazing, where you see the teeth through as he's talking, and I was like, that is beautiful. That was fantastic.
So I mean, hats off first and foremost here to the makeup and the prosthetics department, because the majority, at least in our ILM shots, when he first comes back to life, a lot of that it's all Benedict Cumberbatch wearing makeup, and the work for us was primarily the cheek, as you mentioned. So that was just like a green patch on his face with some tracking marks.
Oh wow, okay.
And then so it was the cheek, and then also we gave him an entirely digital hand, just because what we wanted to do was to, a bit like his face, we wanted the flesh to have rotted away or been nibbled away from a couple of his fingers. And it was just the most pragmatic method for us to do that was just replace the whole hand with CG. But coming back to the mouth, yes, there's some really nice little gruesome details in there. It's very dark, and it's the sort of thing you probably only pick up on when you're watching this movie in a really good theatre or in a nice home theatre with the lights dim. Is that there's little strings of rotting flesh that are all hanging and bouncing around on the teeth. It's as gruesome tasks go, it was quite a cool one actually. But I think the results came together really nicely. Those shots were great fun to put together, to be honest, because they were just on a blue screen stage. So all of the New York environment behind is also CG, and we had some fun with kind of art directing, lightning flashes to not only sort of tie into what was happening on Strange, but also then kind of draw the audience's eye to various points of the city and kind of make them realize where we were. And then, of course, Strange opens up the sling ring portal. And there are even subtle details in that because he's Zombie Strange that's just come back to life and he's not quite got his powers and abilities, and his movements are all jerky. But if you look at the sort of the path of the sling ring, it's a little bit broken up and a little bit jerky. That kind of echoes his movements and his kind of physical limitations.
Nice. I love that so much. Did you guys do he has like a little bit of like a demon brigade as Zombie Strange as well? Was that your work also?
I can't take credit for that.
Can't take credit for that.
That was Weta Digital over in New Zealand who picked up that work.
So that's ILM and Weta combining Zombie Strange and Demon Army. Nice.
Yes, I mean there was quite a lot actually on this project of sort of collaboration between the visual effects vendors to share digidoubles. So the digital versions, because it's it's pragmatic and for the clients to only pay one vendor to actually develop the model and the textures, etc. You don't have to pay for the same thing in numerous places. So the way we approached that was that for certain characters, Frame Store or Weta had built the body and done the hair, and ILM would make the costumes, and then we'd share the models and swap them around. And so it's a great deal of sort of interaction between the vendors and everybody working to a very sort of similar standard and similar kind of naming conventions, which allowed us to share the assets, which was great. It's it can sometimes be a little more problematic, but I think on this project everything worked very smoothly in terms of vendors sharing materials and reference with each other.
That's just as a fan, that's really exciting to hear also. I think it's because it's like literally like the giants in this industry working together to like make this a
Yeah.
really cool collaboration. So I think just for fans, I think that's really cool
Yeah.
to hear what that process was
Yeah,
like.
I think it's the case now that all these big movies, all of the Marvel slate, and if you look at other things that are coming out, Avatar and Star Wars, etc., that they're all so big and so visual effects heavy that almost every company in the world has to be working on them at the
Right.
same time, and so there's always going to be this need to sort of share assets and data between visual effects vendors all over the world.
It's like all hands on deck at that point because it's literally building these entire worlds for a feature film. Like I don't even know
Yeah,
how long that would take one studio to try and tackle a
yeah.
project like that. Like I imagine it's just not feasible. It would take years and
No,
years.
no, you're right. It's just not feasible, and you sort of for those reasons, it's just you would need an absolute army of people, but even to just sort of try and manage that under one team and one supervision, it's impossible to supervise that many people working at once. So
Yeah.
it has to be spread out over multiple vendors.
I feel like your head would explode. It'd be like the Illuminati scene. You just can't even found. Amazing. What was the most like? Clearly, you had no fun working on this at all. But did you have like a favorite death or a favorite effects that you guys did?
Um, I, I'm really proud actually of what myself and Yannick, the overall visual effects supervisor, referred to as the lino beat, which it was Yannick's term for it. That he called it that Wanda was ripping up the kitchen floor lino.
Uh,
It's where it's part of the battle with Captain Marvel. Where I think Marvel comes blasting back out through the wall after she's been sort of thrown through the wall, and Wanda kind of uses her magic to rip up the floor tiles in 3 layers to sort of lift these shields as a sort of defense. And each layer brings up all this kind of subflooring with it. So we had concrete and dust, etc., all getting ripped up, but it's all enshrouded in red chaos magic. And there's just some really cool shots where we're looking through clouds of dust and Wanda's flying through the air, ripping this stuff up. I was just really excited when it all came together. I think that's probably my sort of favorite kind of effects simulation in the work we did.
well, that's so much like a mixture of textures and colors and like beautiful things happening. So I imagine also like knowing the amount of work that went into that and then getting to see it like projected beautifully on a giant screen and just like seeing it working and actually coming together must be just like very nice.
Yes, yeah. When you sort of touched on it there, and you said the amount of colors and textures, and not all of those things come from the same artists or departments, and it's a huge collaborative effort when you're working on shots or sequences like that. So there's sometimes there'd be like perhaps 10 or 15 people involved in one shot, and each of those people might be generating their own elements, which then all have to sort of be kept in sync and come together. So it's quite it's a sort of an organizational as well as a creative challenge to take on a
Right.
sequence at that scale. Yeah.
Okay, dust team, go. Okay, stone
Yeah.
team, go. Yeah.
Very much so, and and to a second, you have to stagger it. I guess it's like any sort of project management. You need to make sure you've got one thing before you can then do the next. So, quite often we need to do the dynamic simulation. So, let's say for example of where Marvel goes through the wall. The first thing there is for the animation team to kind of define the timings and say when she hits the wall. And then one of the effects team would then kind of do the dynamic simulations of all the stone blocks falling down. but it might have been then someone else who picked that up to do all the dust and the fine particulate that comes off it. Someone else may be doing all the sort of, the fire or the, binary powers. So again, as I said, lots and lots of sort of people, all their work intertwining to produce the final result.
I need to come for a visit. I just want to see this. I
Yeah.
want to see you guys like in action. Like, just want to like, creepily stand over your shoulder for like a minute at a time. Just be like, this is awesome.
Unfortunately, though, you could then never leave because you'd be carrying too many trade secrets.
Oh, that's fine. I live here now, and we never heard from her ever again. So, like before I saw this, people obviously kept saying like, "Oh, this is like it's a Sam Raimi movie. It's a Sam Raimi movie." And I was like, "Yeah, I know, like Sam Raimi did it." And then I saw it and I was like, "Oh shit, it is a Sam Raimi movie."
Yeah.
What was that like for you getting to work on that?
It's fantastic, and although I mean, I was actually out on the shoot as well, which was a great experience. I sort of encountered Sam quite often, and I was working on a splinter unit, which was actually quite often directed by Lorne, Sam's son. So whilst I didn't sort of have a massive amount of interaction with Mr. Raimi Senior, I spent about 2 months sort of working on a day-to-day basis with Lorne Raimi. So Sam's son, who's also a sort of budding director. So that was a great experience actually. But then also we were lucky enough to joined virtually into what was so-called some of the turnover meetings, which is where once the sort of the director's cut has been put together and Sam felt that he was ready to hand shots over to visual effects to get started, they would run through the sequence and he'd talk about his vision for the shot. So we were lucky enough to kind of get allowed to join those via Zoom, which was it's great because as a visual effects supervisor and as an artist, it's always best if you can sort of get the brief from the actual kind of the person that's the visionary who's giving the brief, and then that way you can really sort of tune into their creative mindset.
Right. Otherwise, it's like a game of telephone, right? Like it's
Absolutely,
like
yeah.
he said, but he said, he said that he said that he said, and then by the time it gets to you, it's like, okay, well, I think this is what you're asking for. But it had such a specific tone throughout, and it's just really fun. And I just imagine like the kinds of effects that you got to do with this, like just like the Illuminati kill sequences and the zombie strange. I'm like, that is like, we don't usually get to see that in Marvel movies, so that was a lot of fun.
No, it was loads of fun. Like I said, I think it was great for kind of the crew morale and motivation as we were working on the sequence was fantastic because I think everybody knew that we were working on the sort of the real sort of almost the Easter egg of the movie.
Yeah.
It was going to be kept totally secret, and in fact as for us as we were working away on the film, quite often when you're delivering a big sort of visual effects tentpole movie, there are 1 or 2 trailers along the way which cause you to sort of have a crunch time mid-project where you're all scrambling to get the best possible version you can do in an unfeasibly short amount of time. But we were sort of granted the luxury on this project. Our work was so sensitive and so secret that hardly any of it was ever going to get leaked into a trailer. Yeah. And so therefore we were kind of afforded the luxury of just moving along at a linear pace and bringing everything up in the sort of time scale that worked for us. And it was an unusual luxury, shall we say? Probably one that I won't get again. But so it was a real sort of honor and a pleasure to get this sequence that turned out to be sort of so well received.
And it was well worth that secret reveal, 100%. Yeah. Like big fans of Zombie Strange. I know like everyone was like, I was like trying to I feel like everyone saw it before me and I was like, don't spoil it. Like, don't tell me about cameos. Don't tell me about zombies. Like, I don't want to hear any of it. I just want to like get to experience it and let the secrets unfold as they were meant to.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else you would like to share with us before we go?
Well, I mean, I guess I'll just give a shout out to all the ILM crew who, if anyone who worked on the movie, who's tuning in. I think I speak for all of us when I say it was a real pleasure, and I'm sure we're all keen to sort of get involved and back into the MCU before too long and have a go at another one.
Hell yeah, I hope so. Shout out to ILM crew. Well done, guys. All right, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness hits Disney Plus June 22nd. I'm gonna be this is gonna be one that I just have like on in the background all the time. Also, when I'm doing stuff, it's just gonna be like my on repeat comfort movie. So
Cool.